So we are on the Amalfi Coast, which is on the southern Mediterranean coast of Italy, a little strip of land south of the Gulf of Naples. And I'm going to show you video that I shot from the land and from sea, and some of the little towns and the different areas there. So where are we? As I said, we're in Italy. We are driving from the north to the south. We've been through Venice, down through the Cinque Terre, down through Florence, Rome, and now we've driven from Rome down to Sorrento in the Gulf of Naples. We're in Sorrento, but I'm going to show Capri, Sorrento, and Pompeii in a different video. Today we're looking at the Amalfi Coast, which is this little strip of land on the southern side of the peninsula here. That's a narrow little peninsula. We're in the middle of that peninsula, looking to the left, and Sorrento and the Gulf of Naples and Vesuvius, across the peninsula, and off to the right, which is where the Amalfi Coast is. So let's go down to the coast and look around. You can see how close it is, but it's actually about a 40-minute drive. Make a note of these three little islands to the top left, because we're about to go there to go swimming on a boat stop. But right now we're on that coast that I pointed out. And like I said, this is about a 40-minute drive from Sorrento. And this is where you start the Amalfi Coast, heading back the other direction from this view. This is the little road that runs all the way along the coast. But let's go to those little islands I just pointed out. Supposedly, although there's no definitive historical proof and scholars argue about exactly where they are, but supposedly these are the islands that Homer referenced in the Odyssey when Odysseus told his men to tie him to the mast so he could hear them sing and not be driven mad and to his death by going to the island. Supposedly these are the three little islands. Because they're so small and grouped together like this, they make a nice little place to swim. And there are a lot of little fish there. But let's leave those little islands and go along the road here. We're driving now into Positano. And I want to show you what it's like to drive along this road and see it from up on high and then go down into the towns, but also what it's like from the sea and to arrive into the little port and get off and come up from the bottom. Because those are the two ways to experience the Amalfi Coast if you're moving through it. The other way is just park yourself in one of the little towns and stay there. Make note of the traffic here. We are nowhere near being into tiny little Positano, and it's already just jam-packed with traffic, and there's no place to park. And that's noteworthy, because when you have to decide how to do this area, it's a tough decision. And we decided to base ourselves in Sorrento and use that as a base and explore from there. The reason we did that is because, well, I've done it before, and that's kind of the way I knew. But Naples is too far away. Capri is a great place, but it's not really a base to work from. You know, you don't want to be stuck on the island. Naples, as I said, is too far away to use as a base, and it's just not a nice place to be. So your alternative is Salerno, which is at the top of this coast, or Sorrento. Sorrento is a much nicer town, and it works as a perfect base to hit these little places from. And from there, you can go and take the road, and you can drive yourself and park or get a driver, which is what we did. It's much better to do because you're not going to find a place to park and walk around. It's just not going to happen. Or you take a boat and you visit the towns by boat, and we did that too. And there are completely different ways to see this area, and I have a favorite, but I prefer the boat, but it's probably better to try and do them both if you have the time. Some people don't have the time. The alternative is to park yourself in one of these towns and use it as your base, but you're really just going to spend the time in that town. It's much more relaxing to do that if you don't try and go everywhere, but you're not going to see as much, and you don't want to come here and not see everything. But it's going to cost a lot of money. You are not going to stay in one of these little towns on the coast in some place nice and have it not cost you an arm and a leg. It will. So it's much better to use Sorrento as a base and just go everywhere from there. But here we are coming into the top of Positano. And I say the top of Positano because all of these little towns, the road is high and it does not go down into the town. Amalfi is the only one where you can actually go down and drive through the town. The others you just hit at the top and you have to walk down into town, which is what we were doing here. We're walking down into town and it's quite a walk. And it's high too, it's elevation. So you're walking up and you're walking down. So that is definitely a downside to approaching by car. The coast is so beautiful, the towns are so beautiful, the mountains are so beautiful, but they're nothing like I remember them. They were packed with people. They were packed with people 30 years ago, but it wasn't like this. I'm so glad we went and had such a good time and I enjoyed it, but I have to say it was not pleasant to be in the towns with all the people. It was a madhouse. And the Amalfi Coast has this reputation as being so glamorous and jet-setty and luxurious, and it is. Look at the yachts. But being in the town was a rat race of people, and it was not peaceful. You couldn't stop and get a moment's peace anywhere. We got run out of multiple places because we wanted to sit down, relax, have a cup of coffee. And they didn't want that. They weren't interested. If you weren't going to have a full meal, they wanted you gone. So they got rid of you. And I can, as a business owner, I understand, they don't have time to waste on people not spending lots of money, but it definitely put you off. As did queuing up in a little convenience store just to get a bottle of water, among people just shoving to try and get to the front because they only have a short amount of time because they have to get back to their bus or whatever it was. It was not fun. I much preferred it from the water. The view is better, of course, which is why I wanted to make sure we got to the water to see it from there looking back, because I know it's a better view. But being in the towns was no fun at all. When we were driving along the coast, we felt that walking down into them. And then we felt the same way when we'd leave a boat. We had this little boat and it'd pull up and we'd jump off and go into town for, a couple hours and then come back to it. We couldn't wait to get back on the boat to just get away. It would be better if you were staying in the town and everybody left, when it got darker. But in this area, it's not quite like the Cinque Terre where everybody leaves. They're just always busy. And they're bigger, so there are people who are staying there. But it was still beautiful. I mean, you can't help but love it. But this idea of it being all glamorous and jet-setty, no. There's a bunch of tourists, and they're the worst kind of tourists. They're people who want to look glamorous. It's the difference between the Instagram reality and perception. You see the lady standing there doing the selfie and it's going to be beautiful on Instagram, but in reality there's like 60 women lined up to take one from that same shot. It's that kind of scene. Speaking of the difference between perception and reality, here we have the North American male in his unnatural habitat. Like all good friends, Nate was determined to get compromising footage of me swimming, so payback as hell, I guess. But giving each other a bad time is one of the best things about traveling with friends. The natural beauty of this coast with the limestone, as well as Capri, are just unique areas in the world to me. And they're just so beautiful. Look at this structure. I know it's probably safe, but it sure doesn't look like it. But it's just dramatic and beautiful. And the entire coast is like that. It's no wonder it's such an attractive place, and the water is so clear in that blue-green color with the white cliffs. It's just a stunning location. And when I think of the Amalfi Coast, that's what I think of. Not so much Positano or Amalfi. It's the coastline and its beauty and the sea. Here we are coming into Amalfi, and Amalfi is the biggest town on the coast in that area. Well, for what they call the Amalfi Coast. Obviously, Salerno is very large, but for these little towns along the coast, Amalfi is a pretty decent sized place. And you could base out of here and have plenty to do in Amalfi, but it would not be cheap. These couple getting married here while we were there, the only thing I could think is what it costs to get married in this church in the middle of Amalfi. I can't even imagine. And the waiting list, forget about it, as they say. We were in Amalfi 2 different times on this particular trip. And both times we couldn't wait to get out of town, to go on with whatever we were going to do, get out of there, go up the road or get back on a boat and head someplace else. And that was surprising because it's the most famous location on the coast and the destination for most people. We couldn't wait to move on, to get out, to go someplace else. And right after we were in Amalfi, we went up the coast here to another little town called Atrani, and it's a much smaller place. And then from there we went up into the mountains just above all of this and looked down from above here from Scala, which is a tiny little place. And in Scala we had lunch, and it was a much better vibe. Tiny little place, there's nobody up there. It was quiet. There was literally like no one around. And it was nice to just sit and relax and, overlook the ocean and have lunch, lots of food, and then go on with our day, because the next place we were going to go was Ravello. And Ravello's not down on the coast. And that gives it a different vibe, but it's a neat town. And it sits up in the mountains. And there's a place called Via Ruffolo. Okay, so if you'll notice, I've gone this entire video and haven't bored you with any history. You don't really think of history when you think of the Amalfi Coast. It's pretty. Famous people go there, and package tours of people who want to feel glamorous. But Via Ruffolo made me happy for a different reason. Because the moment I saw it, I knew where it fit in my mind. It has these Arabic and Norman influences. You don't generally think of those things in Italy. But did you know that this whole region of Italy was ruled by Vikings? Well, Normans to be precise, because by that time they were mostly Christians. But they were northerners. Okay, so Amalfi was a great naval power in and around the 9th and 10th centuries, like Venice and Genoa. And they, like all the powers in southern Italy, had to fight off Byzantium, the Muslim Saracens, and other regional powers, the popes, each other. Several local powers invited Normans to come down and fight for them as mercenaries. They stuck around, and they eventually took over, founding the Norman Kingdom of Sicily. But it wasn't just Sicily, it was all of southern Italy, including Amalfi. So when Via Ruffolo was built in the 13th century, it wasn't surprising that it had both Arabic and Norman styling. Normans ruled this area. And it had hundreds of years of trade and warfare with the Muslim Saracens of Sicily and North Africa, much like Spain with its Muslim influences. Spain would also rule this region later, the Aragons. So it's a very different history from northern Italy. But I know, nobody cares. Anyway, I think the time on the boat, on the water, was definitely my favorite. We had a really cool captain. He brought some of his grandmother's homemade limoncello, which is the local drink to this area, and particularly of Capri, which was really good, by the way, but it's got a lot of sugar. The time we spent outside the towns was definitely the best. Like here, we're just hanging out in a little cave, swimming with the fishes, not sleeping with the fishes, Luca Brazzi. But those were definitely the best, and the scenery was the best. Just stay away from the people. It's a place best enjoyed in quiet reflection and peace. But that is not an easy thing to find, and it's probably going to cost a lot of money. Sure is nice, though. And I'm really happy I went back.